Welcome, traveler. Tonight, the rain falls over the willow trees of Hangzhou, and the West Lake shimmers under moonlight. They say that if you look closely into its reflection, you might see something watching back. A woman in white, graceful, quiet, yet not entirely human. A spirit of the lake. If you're watching this in the quiet hours, tell me, what time is it where you are? You've found your way to Folklore nights, where legends drift like whispers through time. So settle in. Dim the lights, take a deep breath, and listen to the story of a love that defied heaven itself. This is the legend of the White Snake. The rain fell softly over West Lake. Ripples spread like silver rings while willow branches bent low toward the water. Lamps flickered in the mist, and boats drifted like half-dreams. A young scholar named Suzhen stood on the bridge, umbrella in hand. He was quiet, kind, and poor, the sort of man who studied more than he slept. He often came here when the world felt heavy. That evening, as the wind brushed the surface of the lake, he whispered a wish to no one in particular, for a companion, gentle and true. From the far side of the bridge came two travelers, one dressed in white silk, the other in green. The woman in white moved with a stillness that seemed almost unreal, her hair pinned with jade, her eyes bright and deep as rainwater. The younger one walked at her side, watchful and quick. A sudden gust turned the reins sideways. Suzhen stepped forward, raising his umbrella. "Please," he said, "take this. You'll be soaked." The woman in white met his gaze. "Thank you," she said, her voice light but steady. "You are very kind." "I'm Suzhen," he said. "I am Bai Suzhen, and this is my sister Xiaoqing." They fit together under the umbrella, three strangers sharing one small circle of dry air. Rain tapped the paper like soft drums. Suzhen could smell the faint perfume of flowers and wet silk. He tried not to stare, but Bai Suzhen's calm presence drew him in like light through mist. "There's a tea pavilion just beyond the bridge," he offered. "It's warm there." They walked together. Inside, steam curled from clay cups, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. For a time, silence was enough. Then Bai Suzhen smiled faintly. "You know this city well." "I was born near here," Suzhen said. "The lake has kept me company since childhood." Her eyes softened. "It seems the lake wanted you here tonight." Xiaoqing smirked but said nothing. She only sipped her tea and watched the rain slide down the window frame. When they finished, Suzhen rose. "Allow me to walk you to your inn." "We can manage," Xiaoqing said quickly, but Bai Suzhen nodded. Outside, the rain had gentled to a silver haze. They crossed the bridge once more. Suzhen spoke about the markets and temples, about the monks who rang the bell at dusk. Bai Suzhen listened with a still smile, as if hearing an old melody. At the inn door, lantern light flickered gold against the wet stones. "Thank you for your kindness," Bai Suzhen said. "Please keep the umbrella," he answered. "I'll fetch it another time." Their fingers brushed as she took it, a brief, warm spark in the cool night. "Good night, Suzhen." "Good night," he said, and walked away through the mist. He didn't know that somewhere beneath the lake's quiet surface, a white serpent spirit had once been saved by a kind boy. Nor that the boy had been reborn as him. He only knew that the world felt different now, as if the rain itself had led him towards something he'd been meant to find. Back in the inn, Xiaoqing crossed her arms. "You planned that meeting?" Bai Suzhen smiled softly. "I waited centuries for this rain." The thunder rolled once, low and distant. The storm passed, leaving the lake still as glass. Morning came bright and cool. The air smelled of washed earth, and mist clung to the trees that ringed West Lake. Su Xian walked the path toward the Temple of the Golden Peak, carrying an old basket filled with medicine herbs to sell. The bridge from last night was still wet, but the rain had stopped. As he neared the temple steps, he saw two familiar figures waiting by the gate. Bai Suzhen stood beneath the willow tree, her white robe catching the sunlight like silk spun from clouds. Xiao Qing leaned against the wall, arms folded, wearing her usual amused smile. Su Xian hesitated, then bowed. "Good morning. I didn't expect to see you so soon." Bai Suzhen returned his bow with quiet grace. "We came to offer incense for safe travels," she said. "But perhaps heaven wished us to meet again." Xiao Qing rolled her eyes, but her grin betrayed her amusement. "Heaven or not, my sister has an interesting way of finding people." The three of them climbed the stone stairs together. Bells chimed in the distance, slow and deep, and the sound rolled across the hills like ripples through water. Inside the courtyard, the scent of sandalwood drifted through the air. Su Xian lit a single stick of incense and knelt. He whispered a prayer, for peace, for good health, for the small hope blooming quietly in his chest. When he opened his eyes, Bai Suzhen was beside him, her head bowed, her lips moving in silence. For a long moment he watched her. Her stillness, her calm, the way her presence softened the world around her. When the wind stirred her sleeve, he thought he saw something glimmer beneath it, a faint white scale catching the light before vanishing. He blinked, unsure if it was real. Outside, they lingered beneath the willow tree. Su Xian offered them fresh tea from his basket. "You must let me repay your kindness for keeping the umbrella dry." "Kindness?" Xiao Qing laughed. "You gave it away." Bai Suzhen smiled at her sister, then turned to Su Xian. "Still, he offered shelter without knowing who we were. That is worth gratitude." Her eyes met his, calm but full of something deeper. "Perhaps fate walks slower than rain," she said, "but it always finds its path." They shared tea in the shade. Nearby, a monk struck the great bell again, and its tone filled the air like the echo of eternity. Su Xian felt its vibration in his chest. He didn't know why, but something about that sound, about this moment, felt older than the morning itself. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked quietly. Bai Suzhen looked toward the lake shimmering below. "I believe that kindness travels in circles," she said. "What is given once may return, even across lifetimes." The breeze carried her words away like petals on water. Afterward, Su Xian escorted them partway back to the road. They spoke little, but the silence felt easy. Xiao Qing darted ahead, her green robes bright against the earth. Bai Suzhen walked beside him, her pace slow, her thoughts somewhere far beyond the clouds. At the crossroads, she turned to him. "We are staying near the market. If you pass by, perhaps you will share another cup of tea?" Su Xian smiled. "I'd like that very much." And as they parted ways, he noticed the sound of the temple bell fading behind him, not as a farewell, but as a promise. That night, as moonlight pooled across the lake, a white serpent uncoiled beneath the waves. Her scales shimmered like stars trapped in water. She looked toward the city lights, toward the small room where Su Xian slept, and whispered to the wind. "Soon." Spring deepened across Hangzhou. Peach blossoms painted the streets pink, and the air hummed with bees. Each morning, the city woke to the scent of rain-washed earth and new petals. Su Xian had begun to see Bai Suzhen often. Sometimes they met by the riverbank, sometimes by the tea pavilion where they'd first shared a cup. Always, the meetings felt unplanned, yet always perfectly timed. To the townspeople, they were simply two kind souls who walked together through the gardens, speaking softly as if the world itself might listen in. But to Su Xian, those moments were everything. Her laughter carried through the wind like wind chimes, and her eyes, calm as the lake at dawn, seemed to hide centuries. One day, Bai Suzhen stopped beside the broken bridge, the same bridge where they had first met. The river shimmered beneath them. "Do you believe," she asked, "that every meeting begins long before we are born?" Su Xian smiled. "Then perhaps we have met 1,000 times before." She looked down at the reflection of their faces rippling in the water. "Perhaps," she whispered, "but not all are lucky enough to meet again." A silence fell between them, not awkward, but heavy with feeling. The world around them seemed to pause. Even the breeze slowed, carrying the faint scent of lilies from the far shore. Then Bai Suzhen turned, her voice softer. "There is a festival tomorrow by the lake. Lanterns will float at dusk. Will you come?" "I wouldn't miss it," Su Xian said. As they parted, Shao Qing stepped from behind a tree, arms crossed. "You're breaking every rule you swore to keep," she said. "I have broken none," Bai Suzhen replied calmly. "You know what happens when spirits fall for humans," Shao Qing hissed. "He will grow old. You will not. The balance will turn." Bai Suzhen's gaze drifted to the clouds. "The heavens can turn as they wish. I have waited too long to let fear guide me." That night, a pale mist rose over West Lake. The moon reflected perfectly in the still water, bright enough to hide what moved beneath its glow. When dawn came, the city prepared for the Lantern Festival. Stalls lined the streets, strings of crimson lights hung over the bridges, and drums echoed through the hills. Children chased each other with paper dragons. Merchants laughed over the noise. Su Xian made his way through the crowd, carrying a small folded lantern painted with 2 cranes flying together, a simple wish for good fortune. By the shore, Bai Suzhen stood waiting, dressed in pale blue silk that shimmered like morning fog. Her presence quieted everything around her. "You came," she said with a smile that warmed the cold lake breeze. "Of course," he said. "How could I not?" Together, they released the lantern into the water. It drifted out among 1,000 others, each one carrying someone's wish across the dark. Their reflections trembled together on the surface, 2 souls shining brighter than the rest. As the drums faded, a storm brewed far off across the mountains. The clouds flashed once, silent and distant. Bai Suzhen looked to the horizon, her smile faltering for the first time. "Something is stirring," she whispered. "What is it?" Su Xian asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just the wind." But in her heart, she knew it was not the wind. It was the whisper of a power older than heaven, a reminder that her time among mortals could not last forever. The lake glowed with 1,000 drifting lights. Lanterns floated like stars fallen to the water, their flames trembling against the soft current. Music and laughter echoed along the banks, fading into the night mist. Su Xian and Bai Suzhen walked side by side along the bridge, their shoulders almost touching. Every few steps, the wind carried the scent of lotus blossoms and roasted chestnuts from the festival stalls. "It's beautiful," Su Xian said. "Like the heavens came down to rest on the lake." Bai Suzhen smiled. "The heavens rarely come down willingly," she murmured. He glanced at her. "You speak as though you've seen them." Her smile lingered, soft and secretive. "Perhaps in dreams." They stopped where the bridge arched high above the glowing water. Bai Suzhen reached into her sleeve and took out a small golden charm shaped like a lotus. "For you," she said. "It's for protection." Su Xian hesitated. "I can't take something so precious." "It's not," she said gently. "It's a promise that we will see each other again." The charm caught the lantern light and shimmered between them. He accepted it, touched by her calm sincerity. "Then I promise the same," he said. From the far shore came a sudden peal of thunder. The sound rolled through the hills and rattled the lanterns on their strings. People laughed nervously, hurrying to gather their things, but Bai Suzhen's eyes turned toward the storm. Her expression changed, not fear, but recognition. Xiao Qing appeared at her side, her green robe wet from the rising mist. "Sister," she whispered urgently, "it's not an ordinary storm. The heavenly guards are searching again." Bai Suzhen's voice was low. "Then they will find nothing." Su Xian looked between them, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," Bai Suzhen said quickly, her tone light again. "The rain just doesn't like to be forgotten." Lightning flashed over the mountains. The crowd scattered as raindrops began to fall, slow at first, then harder, until the festival lights blurred into a smear of gold and red. Su Xian grabbed Bai Suzhen's hand and pulled her under the eaves of a nearby pagoda. The rain roared around them. Her sleeve clung to his wrist. Her eyes shimmered like glass. "Are you cold?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. This feels familiar." For a moment, the world disappeared, just the sound of the storm and the warmth between them. Then, without thinking, Su Xian reached for her hand again. This time, she didn't pull away. The thunder rolled closer. In the flash of lightning, Bai Suzhen's reflection in the puddled stones seemed to waver. Not a woman's shape, but the faint outline of a white serpent, its body coiled beneath the rain. Su Xian blinked and looked again. The vision was gone. The rain eased. The wind grew soft once more, and the storm drifted toward the mountains. Bai Suzhen exhaled slowly, her hand still in his. "Sometimes," she said, "the sky reminds us how small we are." "And sometimes," he replied, "it reminds us what's worth holding on to." She looked up at him, and smiled. When the clouds finally parted, the moon broke through, pale and clean. It shone on the soaked bridge, on the lanterns still drifting through the dark, and on two figures standing close enough to share one breath. High above, unseen in the clearing sky, a faint shimmer of light rippled through the clouds, the trail of something divine searching for what had hidden below. But for now, the world was quiet. And in that stillness, two lives began to intertwine like threads in a silk tapestry, fragile but unbreakable. Weeks passed, and the storms faded. Spring turned to summer, and Westlake shimmered beneath the heat like a sheet of polished jade. The air smelled of lotus and river clay. Su Xian opened a small medicine shop on a narrow street near the market. He mixed herbs, weighed roots, and treated coughs and fevers with patient hands. People liked his gentle way of speaking, how he listened as if every ache mattered. Beside him, Bai Suzhen worked quietly, grinding powders, pouring teas, and tending the sick. She learned quickly, though sometimes the villagers whispered that her remedies worked too well. "A drop of her potion, and even the dying sit upright," they said. But no one questioned miracles that healed. To Su Xian, she was a blessing he could never have earned. Her presence filled their home like sunlight through paper windows, soft, steady, and warm. Every evening, when the street fell silent, they would share a bowl of tea and watch the last lanterns drift across the water. One night, Su Xian turned to her. "You've brought life to this house," he said. "Sometimes I forget what it was like before you came." Bai Suzhen smiled faintly. "Do not thank me for what was already waiting to bloom," she said. "You were kind long before I found you." He hesitated, tracing the rim of his cup. "And yet, I feel there's something you don't tell me." She looked toward the window. The moonlight touched her cheek like a secret. "Every heart has shadows," she said. Some are better left asleep. Before he could answer, Xiaoqing burst in from the courtyard, her hair wind-tossed and her expression fierce. Sister, the river's rising again, she said. The monks are chanting by the temple. They think a spirit haunts the lake. Bai Suzhen set her cup down gently. Then let them pray. The lake remembers what it must. Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes. You can't keep hiding forever. I am not hiding, Bai Suzhen said. I am living. When Xiaoqing left, Su Xian reached across the table and touched Bai Suzhen's hand. Her fingers were cool, like smooth porcelain. You don't have to carry burdens alone, he said. For a moment, her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with the reflection of another life. Perhaps, she whispered, I have already carried them across 100 years. Outside, thunder murmured faintly beyond the hills. The candles flickered, bending toward her like reeds in wind. Su Xian said nothing more. He only held her hand until the flame steadied. In the weeks that followed, their shop flourished. People came from distant towns to see the healer and his wife. Children left flowers by the door. Old women claimed the scent of medicine lingered even after the rain. At night the city slept, but sometimes Su Xian would wake to find Bai Suzhen standing by the window, her hair silver in moonlight, her eyes on the lake. He would call her softly, and she would turn, smile, and whisper, Go back to sleep. The night is only dreaming. He never saw the faint mist that curled around her feet, nor the glimmer of white that trailed her shadow as she slipped back into bed beside him. The summer sun dimmed behind gray clouds. West Lake darkened, and the air grew heavy with the promise of rain. Travelers hurried through the market streets, their umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Su Xian was closing the shutters of the medicine shop when an old monk stopped at the door. His robe was worn, the color of ash, and his staff bore the marks of many journeys. His gaze was calm yet sharp, like the still surface of a blade. Peace upon this home, the monk said. May I have a cup of water? Of course, Su Xian said, bowing slightly. Please rest. Bai Suzhen entered quietly from the back room, carrying the cup. When her eyes met the monk's, something unseen trembled in the air, a ripple, faint but deep. The monk's hand paused over the cup. You are not what you appear to be, he said softly. The room fell silent. Su Xian blinked, confused. Master, what do you mean? The monk smiled faintly. I speak of fate, young man. The lake has been restless lately, and such restlessness never comes without cause. Bai Suzhen inclined her head politely. The world is full of mysteries, master. We are only humble healers. The monk studied her for a long moment. Perhaps, he said, but even humble healers cast long shadows. He set down the cup and rose. My name is Fa Hai. I live at the Golden Mountain Temple beyond the river. If ever you seek truth, you may come. Then he turned and walked into the rain. When the door closed, Su Xian exhaled. Strange man, he said. He looked at you as if he knew you. Bai Suzhen's gaze lingered on the empty doorway. He sees more than most. That night, the storm returned. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled over the city. Bai Suzhen stood at the window again, her reflection flickering with each flash. In the glass, her eyes glowed faintly gold, the mark of her true nature. Xiaoqing paced the floor behind her. He knows, doesn't he? Yes, Bai Suzhen whispered. He is a monk of great power. I felt the seal of heaven in his breath. Then we must leave, Xiaoqing hissed. He will tell the others. Bai Suzhen shook her head. No. We have built a life here. Suzhen has done nothing to deserve fear. I will not run from the truth, even if it comes wrapped in thunder. Outside, the storm raged harder. The temple bell rang once, not from the city, but from across the lake, deep and heavy, as though the heavens themselves were listening. Suzhen stirred in his sleep, dreaming of the lake rising, the water curling like serpents. He saw Bai Suzhen standing on the surface, her robes glowing white against the storm. She looked back at him with eyes he did not recognize. When he woke, the dream faded, but the echo of the bell remained in his ears. In the morning, the air was still. Birds sang cautiously in the wet garden. Bai Suzhen prepared medicine as if nothing had happened, her calm unbroken. Yet when Suzhen turned to look at her, he thought he saw, just for a breath, a faint shimmer of scales on her wrist where the sleeves slipped. He blinked. They were gone. She smiled. You look pale, my love. Perhaps you should rest. He smiled back, uncertain why his heart beat so fast. Far across the lake, at the Golden Mountain Temple, Fei Hai stood at the altar, incense curling through the air. So, he murmured, the white spirit walks again among men. He opened his eyes. Then heaven must decide how this story ends. Autumn came early that year. The lotus petals faded, and the air along West Lake grew cool and clear. The marketplace that once sang with noise now whispered like the wind through empty stalls. Suzhen's shop remained busy. Travelers came seeking medicine for fevers brought by the change in weather. Yet, even amid the rhythm of daily life, a quiet unease settled over him. He could not explain it, a chill that clung to him like morning mist. One afternoon, as he closed the shop, a shadow crossed the doorway. It was Fei Hai. His robe was clean but worn, and the faint scent of temple incense followed him. Forgive my intrusion, the monk said. I come not as a beggar, but as a messenger. Suzhen bowed politely. You are always welcome, Master Fei Hai. Fei Hai's gaze wandered over the shelves, the herbs, the powders, the neatly labeled jars. Your remedies are fine, he said, but some poisons cannot be healed by mortal hands. Suzhen frowned. I don't understand. You live beside a being of great power, Fei Hai said softly. She hides her truth, but heaven does not forget. Suzhen's chest tightened. You speak of my wife? I speak of a spirit, Fei Hai said. One who walks in human form, bound by love, yet chained to the laws she has broken. Suzhen stepped back. That cannot be. Bai Suzhen is kind. She heals the sick, feeds the poor. Fei Hai raised a hand. So does the river before it floods. The words struck deep. The monk's voice softened. Goodness does not erase what must be. When mortals love what belongs to heaven, balance cracks. Leave, Suzhen said quietly. You're mistaken. I hope I am, Fei Hai replied. But when the next full moon rises, you will see the truth. When she offers you wine that night, refuse it. Then you will know. With that, he turned and left, his staff striking the wet stones like a drumbeat fading down the road. That night, Suzhen could not sleep. Bai Suzhen sat beside the lamp, mending a sleeve. Her face glowed softly in the golden light, calm and warm, yet Fei Hai's words echoed through his mind. When the next full moon rises. He looked down at her hands, pale, elegant, unchanging. He tried to remember the small signs he had ignored, how her touch was always cool, how her reflection sometimes shimmered oddly in the water, how animals seemed to bow their heads when she passed. When she looked up, he forced a smile. You seem tired, she said gently. Shall I brew you something to help you rest? Not tonight, he murmured. I'm fine. The days passed quietly, but the seed of doubt had taken root. He found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, the way her shadow moved differently in the lamplight, the faint hum in the air when she whispered old words to bless the medicine. At dusk, when the full moon rose, its reflection turned the lake to silver. Bai Suzhen poured wine into 2 cups. Her smile was peaceful, but her eyes glimmered with something ancient. "To health," she said. Su Xian hesitated, Fa Hai's warning echoing like thunder in his chest. He stared at the wine, the moon reflected inside it like an eye. "Drink," Bai Suzhen said softly. "The season turns. We should celebrate what we've built." He lifted the cup, and in that instant, lightning flashed across the water. The reflection in the cup flickered, not Bai Suzhen's face, but the coiled image of a white serpent, scales glinting like pearls. Su Xian gasped, dropping the cup. The wine splashed across the floor, and the image vanished. "Su Xian," Bai Suzhen's voice trembled. He stepped back. "What are you?" For the first time, she had no words. The storm faded into silence, leaving the world hollow and gray. Su Xian's body lay still upon the floor, his face pale as moonlight. No breath stirred his chest. Bai Suzhen knelt beside him, the candlelight trembling across her hands. "Please," she whispered, "I have waited lifetimes to find him. Do not take him from me again." But heaven did not answer. The silence pressed heavy on the room, the kind of silence that only grief can carve. Shao Qing stood in the doorway, eyes shining with tears. "Sister," she said softly, "his soul is gone. You cannot reach him." "I will," Bai Suzhen said. Her voice was steady, her eyes unbroken. "Even if I must walk through death itself." She gathered her white robes, bound her hair with silver cord, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the ground shimmered with water. She raised her hand, and a faint glow rippled across the surface of West Lake, as if the water remembered her name. Shao Qing followed. "Where are you going?" "To the River of Souls," Bai Suzhen said. "He saved me once, long ago. Now I will save him." She walked barefoot into the lake. The surface opened beneath her feet like glass, and the world above dimmed into shadow. Down she went, through layers of water and light, where the reflections of past lives drifted like fallen leaves. Voices whispered in the currents, fragments of prayers, forgotten dreams, and broken promises. At last, she reached the gate of Yama, where the spirits gather before their fates. The air shimmered with blue fire. Souls passed like pale ribbons through the mist, some weeping, some silent. The guardian of the gate rose before her, tall, armored in scales black as obsidian, eyes burning like coals. "No living soul may enter," he thundered. "I am not only living," she said, her voice like water cutting through stone. "I am what lies between." The guardian hesitated. "You are the serpent who sought to walk among men," he said. "Why do you defy the will of heaven?" Bai Suzhen bowed low. "Because love is not defiance. It is remembrance." The guardian studied her for a long moment. Then, with a slow motion, he lifted his spear and pointed toward the dark beyond the gate. "If you cross this threshold, there is no promise you will return." "I do not ask for promise," she said. "Only for chance." The gate opened with a sound like the sea breathing. Bai Suzhen stepped through. The underworld was not fire or shadow. It was vast and quiet, a landscape of gray rivers winding through endless dusk. Bridges arched between drifting islands of stone. Lanterns hung suspended in air, glowing with the light of memory. She followed the current until she found a figure seated beside the river bank. Su Xian, pale and still, his soul bound by the threads of judgment. She fell to her knees. Suzhen, she whispered, I am here. He looked up, confusion clouding his eyes. Suzhen? You shouldn't be here. I could not let you go, she said. Not when I have already lost you once. He reached for her, but his hand passed through hers like smoke. You don't belong among the dead. Then I will belong nowhere, she said. But you will live. Before he could answer, a great shadow loomed over them, the Judge of Souls, his robes flowing like storm clouds, his face hidden behind a veil of light. White serpent, he said, his voice deep as mountains. You defy the order of heaven itself. Why should I grant your plea? Bai Suzhen raised her head, tears glimmering like pearls. Because even heaven cannot undo what love remembers. The judge was silent. Then, slowly, the air around them began to glow. The glow around them swelled until the air shimmered like dawn under water. The Judge of Souls lifted his hand, and the rivers of the underworld hushed. White serpent, he said, in all the ages few have dared what you attempt. The dead may not return to the living. To love across realms is to defy the balance of heaven and earth. Tell me, why should this mortal's life be restored? Bai Suzhen bowed low, her hair flowing like a stream of night. Because life without love is only half alive, she said. I do not seek immortality. I seek to finish the days heaven already gave us. The judge's veil flickered with pale fire. Your heart speaks of mercy, but mercy can poison order. How will you prove your vow? She lifted her eyes. Test me. And so the world around them began to change. The river darkened into mirrors. From its depths rose scenes from her past, each shimmering like a broken reflection. She saw herself coiled in the reeds of Westlake, long before she wore a human face. She saw the moment the young boy Suzhen fell into the water and she, still a serpent, lifted him to the shore. The memory pierced her like light through ice. Would you save him again? Asked the judge, knowing it would curse you to live with longing? Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. The river shifted again. She saw her days as a woman, rain on rooftops, laughter in the shop, a bowl of tea shared at dusk. The image trembled, and her own reflection whispered, you could still return to your kind, forget the pain, rest beneath the waves. She reached into the water and shattered the illusion. I have chosen, she said. Love is not chains, it is a thread that binds even through death. The judge regarded her for a long silence. You speak with truth, but truth cannot shield you from consequence. A sudden roar filled the cavern. From the mist emerged the celestial dragon, guardian of heaven's decree. Its scales shone with stormlight, eyes like twin suns. The judge said, if you can withstand the dragon's flame and keep your heart unburned, your wish shall be granted. The dragon opened its mouth, and a wind like the breath of worlds swept through. Fire cascaded over her like molten gold. Bai Suzhen closed her eyes. She thought of Suzhen's hand reaching for hers, of laughter, of the gentle warmth of living. She let those memories surround her until the fire could not harm them. When the blaze faded, she still knelt, robes tattered, but her heart steady, glowing faintly with the same white light that had always lived within her. The dragon lowered its head. Your spirit endures. The Judge of Souls spoke once more. Return to the living world. But know this, every act of love has its cost. Heaven may grant life, yet it will demand its balance in time. Bai Suzhen bowed. I accept whatever balance the world requires. He lifted his hand, and the river brightened into silver. Suzhen's form began to glow, the threads of death loosening from his chest. Go, said the judge. Before the gates close. Bai Suzhen reached for him, her hands trembling with joy. The world of shadow dissolved into light, and together they rose upward, through water, through mist, through memory, back toward the surface of West Lake. The world above waited in silence. Morning light spilled over West Lake, turning its surface into a field of gold. The water rippled, and from its depths 2 figures emerged. Bai Suzhen gasped for breath as she lifted Su Xian's limp body onto the shore. For a moment, there was no sound but the lapping of waves. Then, with a sudden cough, he drew in air. Su Xian, she whispered, tears falling freely. You're alive! He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the sunlight. Suzhen, I dreamed of you, he said. But I thought it was over. She smiled softly. Love doesn't end with dreams. He sat up, dazed. Around them, the lake shimmered as if holding its breath. The air was calm, but beneath that calmness lingered something faint, a heaviness, like a promise not yet kept. They returned home quietly. The market welcomed them with familiar sounds, the ring of coins, the scent of herbs, the rhythm of daily life. But the townsfolk whispered. They had seen Su Xian's death, his funeral rites. To see him walk again beside his wife made them cross themselves in fear. In the evenings, they stayed close by the window, watching the lanterns float over the water. Su Xian would hold her hand and ask, "Tell me again how you found me." And she would smile, though her eyes were far away. "I followed your soul through every river until I reached the one that would not end." Sometimes she woke in the night, her fingers tracing invisible scales on her arms, her breath trembling as thunder rolled faintly beyond the hills. The storm that once took him seemed to wait there, patient and unfinished. Days turned to weeks. Their shop reopened, their lives resumed, and for a time, the world pretended to forget. But heaven does not forget. At the Golden Mountain Temple, the monk Fa stood in meditation. His robes fluttered though there was no wind. The waters of his basin rippled, showing visions of the couple by the lake. "She walks again among mortals," he murmured. "Heaven warned her once." From behind him, an acolyte asked timidly, "Master, if their love is pure, should it be punished?" Fa's gaze stayed fixed on the water. "Purity is not the question," he said. "Balance is. When the realms of heaven and earth entwine too tightly, the threads of both begin to tear." He stood and gathered his staff. "The storm has not yet passed." Back by the lake, Bai Suzhen felt the first tremor of that coming storm. A flock of herons took flight suddenly from the reeds, scattering like white silk in the air. She turned toward the horizon, dark clouds gathering over the mountains. Su Xian came to her side. "The rain's coming again," he said. She looked at the clouds, their edges glowing faintly gold, like fire behind smoke. "It's not the rain that worries me," she whispered. He frowned. "Then what?" "The heavens," she said. "They remember what I owe." He took her hand, gripping it tight. "Whatever debt there is, we'll face it together." For a moment, her smile returned, the same soft smile she had worn since the day they met. "Together," she repeated. "That's all I ever wanted." But when she looked back at the clouds, her eyes filled with quiet knowing. Somewhere far above, the bells of the Golden Mountain Temple began to ring, and the sound carried across the lake like a warning written in wind. The temple bells tolled through the mist, deep and slow, echoing across the lake. Each strike rolled through the air like thunder, and Bai Suzhen felt its weight in her chest. Fa had summoned her. She knew what it meant. Still she went. The rain began as she and Su Xian climbed the mountain path, soft at first, then heavier, until the world blurred in gray. Her robes clung to her like mist. The wind tangled her hair, and each step felt like walking through memory. At the summit, the golden mountain temple loomed, ancient, unmoved by storm. Monks lined the courtyard, their lanterns flickering in the wind. At the center stood Fa Hai, his eyes like iron and stormlight. "White serpent," he said, his voice carrying over the rain. "You were warned. You defied heaven's decree. The mortal beside you lives on borrowed time." Su Xian stepped forward, drenched and trembling. "She saved me," he shouted. "She did no harm. She only loved." Fa Hai's gaze softened for a moment, then hardened again. "Love cannot excuse defiance. The balance has cracked. Storms rise because of you." Lightning arced across the sky, and thunder answered. The monks began to chant, their voices blending with the rain. The air shimmered with power. Bai Suzhen lifted her head, her hair whipping in the wind. "If heaven cannot forgive love, then let heaven judge me, not him." She raised her hands. A flash of white light rippled outward, shaking the clouds. The lake below roared in answer, waves rising as though the world itself were breathing in pain. Fa Hai struck his staff to the ground, summoning a circle of light. "You would fight heaven itself? I fight only for what is already mine," she said. The storm exploded. Lightning crashed against the temple roof, scattering sparks into the rain. The air was alive with wind and water. The monks scattered as torrents poured down the mountain, flooding the paths. Su Xian called her name, but she stood at the center of it all, robes flowing, eyes bright with sorrow and defiance. Her power surged like the tide, and the lake answered. Water erupted from the earth, breaking through stone and soil. It rose higher, swallowing stairs, then courtyards, then the very gates of the temple. "Stop!" Fa Hai shouted. "You will drown them all!" But her voice rose above the storm, clear and trembling. "Then let the world remember what it costs to love beyond heaven's will." The mountain shook. Waves surged higher still, washing over the temple walls. Through the chaos, Su Xian tried to reach her, his voice breaking through wind and thunder. "Suzhen!" She turned, her face pale as moonlight. For an instant, all the fury of the storm seemed to fall silent. "Go," she whispered. "Please, live." He reached for her, but the current tore them apart. Fa Hai raised his staff one final time, chanting words that split the sky. A golden light burst from the mountain's peak, sealing the waves, forcing them back. Bai Suzhen's cry echoed across the storm as the water fell away, her body sinking beneath the collapsing waves, trapped beneath the temple's seal. When the rain stopped, the mountain was quiet again. The lake lay calm, as if nothing had ever happened. Fa Hai stood in silence, his robes soaked, his eyes heavy. "The balance is restored," he whispered. But in the stillness that followed, a single lotus bloomed upon the flooded path, pale white, shining faintly in the dark. Su Xian fell to his knees beside it. "Suzhen," he murmured, "I will find you, wherever heaven hides you." The flower swayed in the wind, a quiet promise, glowing softly as the world returned to silence. Seasons turned, and the mountain healed. The floodwaters receded, leaving behind silt and silence. Where the temple walls once gleamed, moss grew thick, and wildflowers crept through the cracks. Su Xian lived among the ruins, his days quiet as drifting ash. He rebuilt the shop, helped the poor, and tended to the sick, but each dawn he climbed the mountain and knelt beside the lake. Every morning he found it there, the single white lotus that never wilted. Some days it swayed gently as if answering his prayers. Others, it shone brighter, as though holding back a heartbeat. He spoke to it softly. Suzhen, he would whisper. The world still remembers you. The wind still carries your name. And though no one answered, the air seemed to listen. Years passed. Suzhen grew old, his hair silver as winter reeds. But the lotus never faded. Monks who passed by the lake said the flower glowed faintly on moonless nights, its petals trembling with light. Then one night, a storm rose again, not fierce, but soft, as if the sky remembered the flood with a gentler hand. Suzhen walked to the lake, leaning on his staff. Rain fell quietly, blurring the reflections of lanterns. He knelt beside the lotus and said, If love is balance, then let it rest. If it is memory, then let it stay. He reached to touch the flower. The surface rippled, and a soft light spread across the water. From its heart, a figure emerged, white robes flowing, eyes luminous and kind. Suzhen, she said. Her voice was the same, and yet it carried the sound of rain, wind, and time. He trembled. Suzhen, how can this be? The seal has weakened, she said. Heaven has forgiven what it once feared. He laughed softly, tears mixing with rain. I waited for you. And I, she said, smiling faintly, never left. They stood beneath the falling rain, their hands meeting at last, warm, human, and real. For a heartbeat, the world felt whole again. Then the light began to fade. Will you go? He asked. I must, she said gently. The mortal world no longer belongs to me. He bowed his head. Then I will follow you when it's time. She placed her hand on his cheek. No, she whispered. Live. For every moment we could not. When she vanished, the rain stopped. The lotus closed, sealing its glow within. At dawn, the monks found Suzhen kneeling by the lake, his face peaceful, his hands folded as if in prayer. The white lotus had bloomed again beside him, brighter than ever before. And on nights when the wind passed softly over West Lake, people said they could hear the faint echo of a woman's voice singing through the mist, and the gentle answer of a man's laughter carried by the ripples. They called it the Song of the White Snake, and in time, it became a tale told by firelight, of a love so deep that even heaven could not unwrite it. As the rain settles and the lotus closes, their story drifts into legend. A promise whispered between love and eternity. Some say, on quiet nights, you can still hear her voice in the mist, and the echo of his laughter beneath the bells of West Lake. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If their story touched you, let the world know, leave a like, share this tale, and help it find another dreamer tonight. Subscribe for more folklore, legends, and ancient whispers from around the world. You never know which story will find you next. Folklore Nights, where legends never sleep.